And you're on.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to On the Hunt with Alpin Optics. And I'm your host, Rick White, coming to you from the outdoors here in the state of Indiana. Indiana's turkey season opened just today, so I'm down here doing a little bit of turkey hunting. But, anyways, hey, my guest tonight is a good buddy of mine from back in Iowa, Mr. Jason Meller. Jason, how you doing this evening?
Doing well, doing well.
Yeah, now I've been the last month we've been talking a lot of turkey hunting, and that's what I almost prefer to talk about this time of the year. However, tonight's show is going to be somewhat unique. Jason is probably one is the best shed hunter that I know, and he also has shed hunting dogs that he's raised and trained and the whole bit. So we're going to talk about shed hunting this evening. But before we get into that, I know Jason has probably been out chasing turkeys a little bit. I hope. Have you been out some?
I have been out. We went to South Dakota um, about 2 weeks ago. Me and a older gentleman buddy of mine, and hunted a couple Indian reservations and shot four toms apiece, 8 total. So that was a lot of fun. It's big open country, and I've been out a little bit in Iowa, but it's been so cold here that the turkeys are just kind of starting to get fired up. And four season started today, so I actually took my daughter this morning before school, and we heard a bunch of birds, but nothing came in. So I think the best part of Iowa's turkey season is yet to come. It's just been cold, damp, rainy. We had frost yesterday, heavy frost yesterday. So that's really odd this time of year, but we'll get out some more before it's over, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've been experiencing the same thing since I left home. Well, I hunted in Iowa first season, which was I don't know, at least 2.5 weeks ago, and then I went to Kentucky and now Indiana, and it's been unseasonably cold in these areas too. Now, this morning we had frost here in Indiana, and now it's probably 70 degrees. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk shed hunting. Now, you are a bit unique because not only do you just shed hunt, you've been shed hunting all your life and you find more sheds than just about anybody that I know, but you got into shed hunting dogs just a few years back. So I want you to talk about that just a little bit. And we've got some pictures to share that Paul will pop up, I think, as you're talking.
Sure. Well, it's been about 10 or 11 years now when I decided that I wanted to get a dog and train the dog to shed hunt. Um, you know, I think you got me by a couple years, Rick. I'm 54. I think you're a little bit older than me, but I realized about 10 years ago that, man, wouldn't it be nice to be able to park the truck and let the dogs out and they run around all over and bring back all the sheds? Well, it doesn't work exactly like that, but that was my thought process anyway. So I bought a dog from a guy that was, Western Iowa shed lab breeder. Well, I'll tell you that it's really hard to be a shed dog breeder. It's not like a English pointer that it's been bred into their genes to point pheasants for the last 300 years. It's way different. So, I would say in the grand scheme of things, I bought a glorified lab that I trained to be a shed dog. Um, and I suppose that my dogs get it because we go a lot. But to me, I don't really know if the genes are bred into the different dogs. Quite honestly, you might say they are, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I totally buy that. But anyway, I decided to get a dog. Wanted to train the dog. So there wasn't, 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information out there. There is stuff out there now, but I would probably still go back to the way I did it. That year, I knew I was buying a dog. And so when we went shed hunting, me and my son or daughter or wife or my buddies, we all had backpacks. We always did anyway. We all had rubber gloves and we all had big garbage bags in those backpacks. And I decided that I didn't want the dog, when I was training my dogs, I didn't want the dog to smell my hand. right? It's easy for a dog to go find something that I've touched. Well, we literally that year we for a long time I found 100 plus sheds on foot. Walking. I mostly walk. And that year, it was no different. It was 100 plus. I don't remember the number. And every one of those sheds was touched by a rubber glove and put in my backpack. No human scent was on those horns. And when I would go out and train the dogs, I would bring out fresh antlers on a regular basis. I never would touch them, but the dogs would touch them. Of course, once the dog picks them up, it probably has a little bit of their saliva on the horn, and they probably smell that to a certain degree. But that year, every horn I picked up, we didn't touch because I knew I was going to train the first dog, and now I've trained a couple since. But I really think that was a big key, is that for them to smell the horn. Sight's easy, but a dog doesn't see like I see. I usually, from a visual standpoint, I can outfind my dog 2 or 3 to 1 because I'm higher in the air. I know what to look for a little better. Their nose is right to the ground the whole time. But from a scent perspective, I've never sniffed one out officially. So the dogs are finding the horns mostly by smell. So that year, that was one of the big keys. And then it was every day. It's just like training your dog to be a good duck dog or a pheasant dog. It's continual repetition over and over and over again. And it's crazy when I tell you this story, but it's 100% honest to God truth. Before I would feed my dogs, I would take one of those horns and I would go around the house somewhere and hide it in the house. Even to the point, you might find it hard to believe, but I would hide that horn underneath a pile of dirty laundry. Underneath a pile of dirty laundry. And I always use simple commands, find the bone. Where's the bone? Get the bone. Find the bone, that kind of thing. Before I would feed the first dog I trained, I would make them find that bone. Find the bone. Find the bone. Where's it at? Find the bone. And they would run all over the house and find that bone underneath a pile of dirty laundry. No lie. So, from a visual standpoint, it's easy. If they see it, they're on it. But I wanted them to find them via scent more than anything. So that was a big thing to me, was let's get the dog finding. And a horn doesn't smell a lot. An antler does not have a lot of smell. And it's just like anything, pheasant hunting, bird hunting, when it's really humid out, the birds smell easier for dogs to find pheasants, birds. When it's really dry out, it's harder on a dog's nose. And that goes, hand in hand with antlers as well. So my goal was to let the dogs find 3 or 4 times as many as me, because I knew eventually my legs would get tired of looking for them. It's worked out well. I find a lot more visually than they do, and they find a lot more via scent than I do. So in the end, it's also fun. I've read different things now, that walking, shed hunting without a dog is like going for a walk in the woods. And I buy that to a certain degree. But it is a lot more fun taking your pets out, and ours are, they're pets. We have 3 labs, 2 silvers, 1 yellow, and they're shed hunting dogs, but they're also our pets. So,
right. Now let me ask you this: a shed has scent, like you said, and I know they don't have much scent. I get asked this all the time, but what about a shed that's been out there from the previous year? Do they find sheds that are 1 and 2 and 3 years old by accident, or do they still smell those?
I think they still smell them, actually. I kind of believe that the older sheds might actually smell a little bit more because they're starting to decompose and break down. The areas that I shed hunt, I go pretty hard. If I've got a certain buck in mind, I'm hammering that timber from January until about April. There, to me, I get really excited. It's going to sound weird, but I get excited when I find an old shed, a decent sized old horn, just knowing that it's been laying there for a year or 2 years and nobody's went by it. That kind of gets, of course, I like finding big, fresh brown ones too, right? But finding an old one that's big, and the dogs will find them. There's no doubt. They find the old ones as well. But where I go, I'm pretty avid. There's not a lot of old ones to be found. There's just not.
Right. Now, um, you know, you're living in Iowa, you're in the Midwest, and I know you've probably shed hunted some other states and stuff, but for the Midwest, if someone was to ask, what is the ultimate time to go shed hunting? Now, you said January through April, and there's a lot of deer that carry into March, but if you were going to take a week off, let's just say, what week, in your opinion, and that can vary based on the weather and things like that, but what week would you take off?
Well, to me, I'm going to kind of dance around the answer a little bit, only because I think there's a lot of variables. So if nobody is shed hunting, the areas that you have permission for, which I'll tell you the chances of that are very, very, very slim. I think the number one trespassers in the Midwest are probably mushroom hunters, followed by a close second, shed hunters. So if nobody's shed hunting your ground, wonderful, right? Wait till all the horns are dropped. Third or so week of March, you're probably at the 90% range, right? And then go in there and pick them up. But a lot of the places that I go, other people have permission. So it's a function of who's going to go, what's the temperature outside. If you get some really cold weather, the horns will start popping off, literally. If it's been really warm, they hold them longer. If there's a really, really cold winter, I mean, the best time to go shed hunting, the best years I've ever had, is when the temperatures have just been brutal in January and February and March, really cold, because all the deer congregate on the best food source around. When it's mild out, warm weather, they're spread all over. So they're spread all over. They bed all over. So the best time to go is when it's, a new shed hunter that goes out on a mild year, kind of like we had this year, is going to be tougher. Really, really cold. The distance between bedding and feeding is less, and they mostly bed and they mostly feed. They're not just out wandering around. So, the best time to go would be towards the end of March if there's no pressure. If there's pressure, I think you need to go after those if we get a really 3 or 4 cold days and they're hammering a food source, you got to go. If we get, in February, say we get a bunch of snow in January and a bunch of it melts off, the south facing slopes melt off. Deer like to lay in the sun. South facing slopes melt off first. So to pinpoint an exact time, to me, the best time would be the end of March if nobody's hunting your ground, because literally you should be able to go out there on the primary food source or a few food sources, walk the south facing slopes, and you do pretty well. But I think, when I started shed hunting, like you said, I mean, I've been doing it pretty avid for about 25 years. There was nobody. I mean, there was nobody 25 years ago to speak of, hardly anybody. And now you can't go anywhere without finding people or boot prints or, whatever the case may be. So 25 years ago, it was way different than it is now. It's way more competitive now than it ever used to be. And I've literally found thousands of horns, no doubt. You've seen, my stuff, and thousands. I mean, and I love it. But, as you get older, a little bit of that competitive drive starts to go away, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
to
I
me,
know.
it's just not like what it used to be. I still like finding them. I found some in South Dakota. I was in Texas. I found some in Texas this year. I enjoy finding them no matter what. But, the little 4 points don't do much for me anymore. I want to find, 80-inch rib cages is what I'm looking for. So,
Right now, uh, a lot of people ask me, where do you look? Now, you mentioned food sources, and you mentioned bedding areas, and I know you probably hone in on those areas more so than some of the other areas. But what are some of the other areas that you are looking at when you're out? I mean, you're looking everywhere, but what are some of the key areas to look for?
to me, if I had to pick one type of terrain feature, okay, just one, what's the best? People talk about fence crossings where the deer jump the fence. Well, I can tell you, in a normal year, if I find 100 plus horns, antlers, if I find two at a fence crossing, I'd be lucky. So, people will talk about that. You read articles about that. Throw that out the window. The number one place to find a horn as far as a terrain feature, and I'm going to, give away a little secret here, but a lot of people already know it, is the waterway within the ag field. The waterway is grass. The ag field is corn and beans or whatever it might be. The deer feed in the corn and beans, and they just soon go lay down in the grass. And they get up and they go down. They get up and they go down. And if you ever watched a deer lay down, they're not super graceful. When they get to the ground, it's kind of a clunk. Well, by far, the number one terrain feature to find horns is in the waterways. I've seen deer feeding out in huge cornfields before, and went out there with my ATV and buzzed the waterways and found a dozen antlers in 30 minutes. No joke. South facing slopes, if you're hunting in the timber, they melt off first. The top of the ridge and the crest is the best. Deer don't like to bed in the bottom. They don't really like to bed on the north side where there's a lot of snow. They just soon bed on the top or slightly down the hill. But to me, the best place to find them is locate the food source. Where are they feeding? Deer have to eat pretty much every day, especially when it's cold. Locate the food source. Drive around at night. Drive around early in the morning at daylight. It's not hard to figure it out. And then, of course, it's bedding to feeding and anywhere in between. But a lot of times the deer like to bed, in that cushy grass in the waterway versus bedding in a bunch of corn stalks. Cold ground. They'd rather go where there's a little bit of insulation on the ground in the form of, the waterway. So that would probably be my tip as far as if you're going to look, in ag areas, look the waterways for sure.
Right. Now,
the other thing about the waterways, the other thing about the waterway, sorry to interrupt there. We got a little delay here, is that, antlers that fall off in the timber, the squirrels will hammer on them. Out west, the porcupines hammer on them. Antlers that fall in the waterway out in the middle of the cornfield, a lot of times that's where you're going to find your old antlers as well, because nothing's chewing on them out there. A mouse might nibble a little bit, but in Iowa, it's squirrels. Squirrels hammer on them. Coyotes will pick them up, but they don't chew them down to nothing. A squirrel will eat an antler, not chew on it, eat it. So there aren't many squirrels out in those cornfields or bean fields out in the ag, way out from the timber. So you got a good chance of finding some old ones possibly in some of those waterways as well.
Yeah, you make a good point. Years ago, I was doing a hunt in Iowa, a bow hunt for deer, and an old running buddy of mine that Jimmy Estes was filming me, and we actually filmed a squirrel at the top of an oak tree that had an antler in the tree and was chewing on the antler. Had found it and drug it up into the tree. So that was kind of cool. Now, if there's any questions, we're only going to go to 6:30 tonight. We started a little bit late, but I know Jason's got some plans. But if there's any questions that anybody has that's watching right now, send your question in. Paul will send that over to us and we'll try to answer it. I mean, Jason Miller's vast amount of knowledge on sheds and stuff. But hey, when do you have pups on the horizon? Anytime soon?
We currently do not have any in the oven, if you will, but we do have one of our silver labs is probably going to be in heat in the next 3 weeks or so. So we are considering having a litter. We had a litter about a year and a half ago, and they were sold crazy. It was crazy how quick they sold. And we've got small labs. Our silver lab 42 pounds, so they're not like a humongous lab. So they're a house dog, but yet they're kind of a smaller lab. And I wanted them that way. They've got more endurance that way. Instead of a 100, 90 or 100 pound great big lab, we intentionally have them on the. So, when I breed, I find a male that's, 50 pounds because my females are about 40. So we probably have a litter. We'll probably have a litter, Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. What's the average price for a shed dog or silver dog like yours? What would a person expect to pay for something like that?
Well, I'll tell you that, COVID has driven up the prices of dogs a lot. We sold our last litter, those silver lab purebred AKC registered chipped dogs. We sold them for $1,500 a piece. And I had people from all over the U.S. wanting them. Honestly, they were telling me I was selling them too cheap. I had a lot. Oh, you're selling them way too cheap. And we had people that wanted to put them on a plane and fly them and the whole bit. So it was kind of crazy. I was surprised at the demand, and I did very little advertising. I advertised one day on a couple sites, and I have a list of about 40 people that wanted a dog because they all sold so fast that they said, if you have another litter, call us. So it's kind of a supply and demand thing, I guess. You know, I bought my dogs. Back when I was a kid, you buy a lab for $100, right? And my shed lab, I think, cost me $1,000, but that was 10 years ago. So, it is what it is, I guess.
Right. Hey, Paul, how are we doing on time, Paul?
Looking at 6:30, right up.
6:30. Okay. Well, I know Jason has some things he's got to do this evening. He's got to take his daughter to ball practice is one big thing, and they don't want to be late. And we did have some technical difficulties starting off, so we were a little bit late. But Jason, you're a vast amount of knowledge when it comes to shed hunting, and I'd like to get you back on the show maybe in a couple of months, and maybe we could talk. So maybe before deer season or something, and we could talk about not only shed hunting, but maybe pre-planning your early season deer hunt or something, if you'd be interested in doing that.
You bet. That'd be fine. It was kind of fun, If somebody has questions and you want to do a follow-up sometime, that'd be fine. Once we got past the technical difficulties on my end and your end, it was kind of enjoyable,
Right, exactly. So, all right. Well, listen, I appreciate you being on, and Paul, thanks for putting everything together on your end. And
Yep.
I don't know exactly who our guest is for next week. In fact, with turkey season underway, it's just who I'm able to find. But we'll get Jason back on again sometime, and we'll get things rolling for next Wednesday. I should be back in Iowa, and I haven't been home for quite a while. But anyways, folks, those of you that joined us tonight, we certainly appreciate you coming along with us. And don't forget to check us out next Wednesday, 6 to 6:30 on The Hunt with Alpine Optics. For now, I'm Rick White. On behalf of Jason Meller, thanks for coming along. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.